Welcome to Dermot Cavanagh's Watercolour Workshop. I'm going to be taking you through the basic techniques that you will need to learn to paint watercolours. Now, just to give you an example of the brushes that I'm using, the first of which is a 1-stroke 3/4 inch flat brush. You can see that it is chisel shaped, and if we turn it on its side, it's pretty thin. This brush is very useful for putting on broad washes. It covers areas very, very quickly. The second one is a number 8 round. Now this brush again can cover broad areas. You can see there, it puts on a lot of wash very quickly. But as well as that, if we use the chisel edge of the brush, we get very fine lines. A very, very useful brush when you're doing the likes of grass, when you want to give a broken edge to a grassy stump or something like that. You can use it on a side to give you the broken edge for foliage and trees. And the likes of fence posts is very useful for putting those in as well. That's the number 8 round. Again, it's a blend of sable and synthetic hair. Moving on, the next brush is the number 5. Now this is a sable brush, but it's a very, very small sable, so therefore it's not that expensive. And again, for doing fine detail, it's a very useful brush because we get a very fine line and a very easily controlled line. But if we put pressure on the brush, we can also cover broad areas. Now, if we're doing window panes in houses, by flattening out the brush, we get a nice rectangular shape for doing window panes. We can do a Georgian window very, very quickly just by using small strokes of the brush. And there's our window. Very, very quickly. Using the chisel edge of the brush, we get very fine lines. If we're painting trees, we can get nice branches with it. But there's only so far this brush can go, because when we need a very fine flick, we need to introduce the rigger. And if I show you it against the number 5, you can see that the hair is a lot longer. This means that you can get greater control when you're rounding a corner because the brush will go with you. It bends back on itself and you get a lot of play out of the brush. And then when you're doing little flicks, you get a very fine edge to those twigs up towards the top of a tree. You get great control over the brush. In fact, it takes a little bit of time to get used to using this brush. So what I suggest you do is do one of the most natural things, and that's sign your name with it. That way, you don't have to think about what you're doing. There we are. Up to now, we've been dealing with washes and how to control washes and control your brushes. And that's very, very important because that's what watercolour is all about. But I always say that the success of good watercolour painting is good draftsmanship. And if you can't really reproduce what you can see in the landscape, well, you're going to get lost whenever it comes to painting it. So that's what we'll do now. We'll show examples of good and bad composition and how to actually use perspective to give you a realistic image of what you're looking at. Now, we start with the pencil on cartridge paper this time, and what I'm going to do is draw a rough frame just to show you how to compose a painting. So we have the outside of the watercolour paper. This would be your watercolour paper whenever it comes to painting. So we put in a little house. There's the roof, coming across like that. And then we have a little lean-to on the back here, a couple of walls coming down, chimney on top, and then we break that off along the ground with a bit of grass. Put a little house out at the end there as well. And then behind the house we have a tree. There's a big tree growing up. And there's a path coming down from the doorway into the corner. And then a bit of a fence coming across here, and we have another big tree over at this side. Now let's have a look at what we've got and why this is good composition. If we take a look back at the little sketch, you can see that we have a path leading our eye into the painting. It takes us right up to this focal point, the centre of interest, the little house. Then our eye will not disappear off to the left-hand side of the painting because we have a little bush here. Our horizon line is below halfway, so it leaves us that we have a nice sky to complement a beautiful scene below. We have a tree behind the house, which is going to be dark, and that makes the house shine up and look bright in front of the dark background. Off to the right-hand side of the painting, we have a big tree. That tree is stopping the eye going off the painting to the right. If we look again, we can see that this tree is a different height to the one behind the house, which lets us know that the tree behind the house is further away, as it should be in perspective. The houses themselves, the house and the outbuildings, all the roof heights are of varying heights and different angles to one another, which gives us more interest within the subject itself. Now let's have a look at another painting with bad composition and see how the two compare. If we take our horizon line this time to halfway up, we'll just roughly come across there, and we start off with a house, same as before, and we put another house over here. Now sometimes whenever you're out in the landscape, you'll see things like this. There might be something that attracts you to a scene. And there's a mountain behind. We have a tree over here, a bit of a bush here in the foreground, path coming down from the house, another path coming from this house, and a bit of foliage in the middle. There's a couple of chimneys on the house. There we are. So there's another painting to look at. We still have the path leading our eye into the painting, but this time we have actually painted two pictures. I'll draw a line down through that. What happens whenever the eye comes in, it comes to rest on this house, and then it bounces across and it sees this house, and what happens? Your eye keeps bouncing back and forth, not knowing where to rest. And this is confusing, because at the end of the day, what everyone wants to look at is a pleasing scene. So what I suggest is, if you have two houses in the one scene, be selective of which one you want and do away with one. You can turn that into a tree over there, just to block out the second house. You don't want to play around too much with the landscape, but what I'll say is be selective, and if moving something makes for a better painting, well then by all means do it. We'll move on now and look at other examples of composition. Well, first of all, we start by drawing another box. And this time, we're going to do a seascape. We have a landmass coming in from the left-hand side into the sea. And we have a big rock sticking out of the water. And a cloud, a big dark stormy cloud up in the sky here. So there is another composition for a painting. We'll put a boat in as well. There we are. There's a boat in the water. Now, why is this bad composition? We must ask ourselves. The thing is, it's quite a nice scene. It's a lovely seascape, but what we're doing, we're splitting the painting again in two. We have a horizon line halfway between the top and bottom of the painting, and again, our eye is starting to bounce between the two. You know, thinking, should I look at the top, should I look at the bottom? We have a massive big rock here being painted against the sea. Therefore, it's going to cause a lot of difficulties for us whenever we go to paint it, because we have to paint the sea around it. We also have this landmass coming out from the left-hand side. We have the dark shadow of the cloud on the left-hand side. So really, we only have this part of a painting. It's a nail shape. Up here we have nothing at all. It's completely empty. So how do we correct this? Let's move across and show how we change this composition to make a more pleasing painting. So just to give us an outline for a painting, we have to draw a box. It always looks better if it's framed. Now we're going to take the horizon line and drop down below halfway. So there's the sea level. The landmass that we're drawing, this rock, we'll draw it against the sky, because the sky is going to be light, and therefore we don't have to paint around it. It's not sitting in the middle of the, right in the center of the sea, where we're going to have to spend time either masking it out or painting around it. Then we have our landmass coming down into the water. Again, it comes in and has a very straight bottom to it. This line must always lie level because the water will cut it off straight. There's our sea level. And all we have to do to show a bit of balance in the painting is put the dark cloud to the right-hand side. Because we have a landmass on the left, which is dark, we have a cloud on the right, and we have the rock in the middle. And we can put the boat here, just to fill the foreground of the painting. There's a little flag up the top, show which way the wind's blowing. So there we are. The composition has been corrected very, very simply and very easily.